John Oliver. Another one of those left-wing late-night comedians. Well, I often see him on the trending list on YouTube, and I often see him get lots of views. Usually his show is pretty simple. It's the current year. Drumpf. Orange Man bad. And your typical NPC talking points. He's recently released a video about the RNC 2020 and Kenosha. And I've got to tell you, John Oliver lies. He lies and lies and lies. And also his jokes are not funny.
Welcome to the show, still taking place in this blank void. Think of it like the moon, in that it's frigid, colourless, and occasionally occupied by one very lonely, malnourished man who's definitely urinated in his suit.
Hilarious.
So tonight, we're going to talk about two things in particular. The Republican National Convention and the horrific events in Kenosha, Wisconsin, where Jacob Blake was repeatedly shot in the back by police and a vigilante killed 2 people.
You mean Jacob Blake, the convicted criminal who sexually assaulted a female and was armed with a knife? Details have confirmed that the police have said that the reason that they couldn't apprehend him was because he was armed with a knife, which you can kind of see in the footage, and that knife was connected to his knuckles. Kind of like brass knuckles, but instead of the knuckles, there's a knife. Trying to apprehend him physically would have been dangerous. Also, the car he was trying to get into had children inside the car. Bigger point, that car did not belong to him. So were the cops supposed to just let an armed person hijack a car with 2 children when it's not even his car? According to John Oliver, yes. Can't argue with that. But what about the Kenosha kid? It's well known now, especially if you actually look at the footage, that he was defending his own life from violent attackers. By the way, all 3 people that were shot were violent felons. One was even a child molester. Does John Oliver defend child molesters? You know he does. He's got that kind of look.
That the Republicans' opening argument seemed to essentially be this.
Ladies and gentlemen, leaders and fighters for freedom and liberty and the American dream, the best is yet to come.
Okay. Am I supposed to be shocked here that we had a positive message about the company, something uplifting, you know, instead of the doom and gloom pushed by the Democrats constantly? John Oliver, do you want the American people to be panicked, suffering, and shaking in their seats? Do you want them to cry and defecate on themselves as they worry about the future? Oh, I'm so scared. I'm scared. Life is meaningless. Because that seems to be what he wants. Furthermore, you talk as if the RNC wasn't a very successful event, which it was. You know, the Democrats were bragging that, oh, well, you know, the DNC got more TV viewers than the Republicans, but what they didn't tell you is that most of the Republicans and conservatives watched the RNC online. Also, everybody thought the DNC was cringe. So why don't we just compare it? Let's compare this clip to a clip from the DNC convention.
Donald Trump's ignorance and incompetence have always been a danger to our country.
Women will decide this election, and we'll replace Donald Trump with a president who respects us.
I'm proud to be a nasty, nasty woman.
Guys, this was on national television. National TV. Someone should sue them for the therapy bills.
Because it was 4 days of a full-throated denial of objective reality. For one thing, there was the misleading portrait they painted of Trump's opponent.
If Biden wins, he'll be controlled by the environmental extremists.
We'd be one step closer to government-run health care.
Biden has pledged to defund the police.
And he's even talking about taking the wall down. How about that?
Honestly, that sounds great. Unfortunately, though, Biden has promised to do exactly none of those things.
By the way, none of those are lies. Biden has said all of these things at one point. He's talked about universal health care, that's socialism. He's talked about tearing down the border because, you know, the Democrats are open border. He's talked about most of these things in some sort of way. So John Oliver is lying from the get-go.
Convention speakers also claimed that Trump never called white supremacists very fine people, which he did.
He literally never did this. This literally never happened. You are lying, lying, lying. What Trump said was that there are very fine people on both sides, referring to conservative protesters and Democrat protesters. In other words, he was saying that yes, there are some bad people in protest groups, but whether or not they're from the right or from the left, Both sides have fine people. He was not talking about white supremacists. He was talking about regular old Americans. But of course, to John Oliver, you're a right-wing bigot if you're not on his side. But I'm not white. Doesn't matter. You're a supremacist.
I'm honestly surprised a speaker didn't at one point claim that Trump invented parakeets or that he stopped the murder hornets by sucking them straight out of the air.
Orange man bad. I see.
But maybe the biggest gulf between the RNC and objective reality concerned race. Take Nikki Haley's speech, in which she flatly insisted America is not a racist country, and then told the inspirational story of how the Confederate flag at her state's capital was taken down in 2015 after the massacre at Mother Emanuel Church.
We came together, black and white, Democrat and Republican. Together, we made the hard choices needed to heal and removed a divisive symbol peacefully and respectfully.
First of all, John Oliver, there's something you need to understand because, I think you're a foreigner. I don't think you're actually from here. Maybe you are. I don't really care. But what I will say is this. You do realize that the Confederates were Democrats? And there's nothing wrong with the Confederate flag. First of all, it's a piece of history. It should not be censored or taken down. I don't expect Democrats to understand that. But maybe you should. Because if you ignore the past, it repeats. In the past, Democrats were the Confederates. In the past, Democrats were the ones who fought to keep slavery legal. Democrats were the ones who started various hate groups, like the Triple K. Yes, Democrats.
Haley also conveniently leaves out the part where the candidate she's endorsing has defended those who proudly fly the flag by saying it represents the South.
Yes, it does. It represents the South. It represents history. And it represents the Democrats. Funny how the Democrats are trying to hide their own history, almost as if they don't want the black voters to know that the ones who enslaved them were actually the Dems. Would be a shame if they all found out.
And a lot of the RNC's messaging on race seemed intended not so much to win over black voters, as to reassure white people that they could vote Republican without being racist.
Wow, John Oliver. So, if you vote Republican, you're racist. That's literally what you're saying here. First of all, I am a person of color. You are a white man. And you're telling me, a POC, that if I vote for Republicans, which I plan to vote for Trump, because, yeah, law and order would be nice. Rioting in the street. They burn down the neighborhood. You're telling me that I, a POC, am racist if I vote for Trump? Are you out of your goddamn mind? How dare you, John Oliver? People, you can vote for whoever you want to. You're not a racist if you vote for Republicans. That's baloney. And that's coming from a POC. I can't give you an N-word pass. But I can do this.
The audience they were talking to was pretty clear, even in small moments like this.
The American people know we don't have to choose between supporting law enforcement and standing with our African American neighbors.
Well, hold on there, Mike. Who is the we in that sentence? Because it seems like you're making a distinction between we, the American people, and our African American neighbors, who I guess by extension are somehow a different group entirely.
First of all, that's not what Pence said. He's completely misunderstanding and misinterpreting the statement. Listen carefully to Pence.
We don't have to choose between supporting law enforcement and standing with our African American neighbors.
He didn't say that Americans and African Americans were different. He was saying that there's no reason we have to choose between standing with police or standing with African Americans. That's what he said. And he was talking about America as a whole.
Shouldn't really be surprising coming from Mike Pence, a man who permanently looks like he should be living in Ken's white flight dream house. When the RNC chose to feature the St. Louis couple who were charged with threatening Black Lives Matter protesters at gunpoint last month.
It seems as if the Democrats no longer view the government's job as protecting honest citizens from criminals, but rather protecting criminals from honest citizens.
They're not satisfied with spreading the chaos and violence into our communities. They want to abolish the suburbs altogether.
Wow. Think about how incendiary that message is. Violence and criminals are coming to your community in the form of low-quality apartments, and you must defend yourself, take it from us, the couple who pointed guns at Black Lives Matter protesters.
Yes, there's absolutely nothing wrong with any of that, because John Oliver, if you were actually being honest about the story, you would know that Karen and Ken over here had their home invaded by violent protesters, members of BLM and Antifa. They had weapons. So the two homeowners brought out their gun. And not only that, the so-called protesters, really they were rioters, the rioters broke down their gates on private property. It even had a sign that said, "Please do not trespass. This is private property." They broke down the metal gate, they marched onto their lawn, and then they started threatening this couple. They brought out their guns, which they legally own, and they have a legal right to defend themselves and their property. And yes, they defended their lives. What's wrong with that, John Oliver? Don't you live in a gated community? Wouldn't you react the same way? I'm getting really tired of this, folks. John Oliver is nothing but a deceiver. His entire show is nothing but deception. They don't actually tell you the full story. They lie to you. And why is he lying to you? Because he thinks you're stupid. He thinks that you're so stupid that you won't know the facts. You won't know the story. And you will be completely and utterly fooled. I'm sorry, but we're not stupid, John Oliver.
And rhetoric like that, and the worldview it encompasses, has consequences.
You mean like the incendiary rhetoric from the Democrats?
I just don't even know why there aren't uprisings all over the country, and maybe there will be.
Show me where it says that protests are supposed to be polite and peaceful.
Biggest terror threat in this country is white men, most of them radicalized up to the right.
This is who the Democrats are. And you're going to tell me that it's the Republicans and the RNC. They're such meanies. They're saying mean things. It's all their fault. John Oliver, shut up already.
Followed Kyle Rittenhouse, a 17-year-old who traveled there from out of state and was illegally carrying a weapon.
Another lie. Holy God, you're a liar. You lie about everything. You lie when you wake up. You lie when you look at the mirror and say, "I'm a straight male. I'm strong." Lies. Let me get something straight, folks. Kyle Rittenhouse, not only was he defending his own life from violent attackers who were armed. One guy had a handgun, one guy was trying to smash his skull with a skateboard, and one of the other men was physically assaulting him. He had a lot of restraint and shot in self-defense. The footage proves this. Not only that, he was not illegally carrying the weapon. According to the laws of Wisconsin, you are allowed to open carry a rifle as long as you are older than 16. Kyle is 17. So the idea that he's illegally carrying a handgun because he's 17 and not 18 is completely and utterly debunked. You don't do any research whatsoever, do you, John Oliver? This whole show is fake news.
I don't know if he saw the McCloskey speak the night before he chose to drive to a city he didn't live in to defend property he didn't own.
Kyle Rittenhouse did not live in Wisconsin, but he lived very close in a state near the border. He worked in Wisconsin, and the business owner, I believe the one that he worked for, asked him to help defend the property because the police weren't. He wasn't there for no reason. He worked in Wisconsin. That's another fact that John Oliver lies to you about.
Just look at the difference in how the police in Kenosha responded to Blake and how they responded to Rittenhouse.
Alleged gunman Kyle Rittenhouse walking away, gun in tow, as people scream that he just shot protesters. One law enforcement officer seeming to ask Rittenhouse if anyone was hurt.
Someone injured straight ahead?
2 incidents, 2 videos, with some asking why. 2 different responses.
Because Kyle was acting in self-defense, and he was trying to turn himself into police, to which he did. The police told him to go home. He went home and turned himself into police in his home state. Kyle Rittenhouse never did anything wrong. Meanwhile, the guy on the right, Jacob, was he was a domestic abuser, a sexual assaulter. He was attempting to kidnap children, and he was armed with a knife. Hello? There's a huge difference between these two people. The fact that they think it's the same says a lot about John Oliver and the left. These people are lunatics.
And if you're looking for a better visual illustration of the differences between being black and white in America, I don't think you're going to find one, except maybe for seeing exactly who sits down and who stands up when Cotton Eye Joe comes on at a wedding.
Okay, this one was just offensive. I like Cotton Eye Joe. How dare you?
Just watch how the next day, the Kenosha police chief couldn't help but spread blame to the protesters who were shot at and killed.
He keeps saying protesters, but he really means is rioters. Those people were rioting. I've seen the footage. They were rioting and attempting to burn down buildings. They did burn down cars. If it wasn't for the armed civilians protecting the property, they would have destroyed the city. But John Oliver doesn't care about that. He doesn't see the violence and destruction from BLM, Antifa, and the left. He lives in a ivory tower, a gated community with all the rich people. Nobody riots in his streets, but they should.
The people who got murdered were up way past their government-imposed bedtime, and you were nice enough not to even mention it, except to imply that maybe it was a reason they kinda had it coming.
Yeah, and they were all convicted felons. One was a child molester, one was a domestic abuser. They're all criminals, but yeah, I feel so sorry for them. They physically assaulted a minor, a 17-year-old. So, yeah. Okay, John Oliver. You're so smart. You're so enlightened. What do you weigh? Like 132 pounds? 5'5"? Lots of testosterone, I'm sure. And it just goes on and on and on. I'm not going to review this entire clip. It would be too tiring. But John Oliver is a show that just lies and lies and lies. He's lying in almost every single statement. It's always Orange Man bad, it's the current year, how dare the Republicans do this, Republicans bad. But the problem is that he never presents the facts. I've pointed out so many of the lies in the story that you can easily verify if you actually look it up. Actually look at footage. Actually look at what was said. And I believe I know why. People like John Oliver, this cabal of late-night comedians and internet comedians that YouTube loves to push, even though they suck and nobody likes them. They're all on the same team. They're pro-Democrat, pro-left. They're all rich. They all live in this little bubble. They don't understand that people are suffering. They don't understand that businesses are being burned down, that rioters in the street are burning things and hurting people and destroying America. BLM claims to be a Marxist organization that's going to destroy capitalism and institute communism. Antifa wants anarchy. And there's nothing but chaos and destruction and death out on the streets. And the Democrats have enabled it every single step of the way. But no, John Oliver is going to tell you that it's all the Orange Man's fault. It's all the fault of the Republicans. Right-wingers bad. Left-wingers good. I think it goes without saying that John Oliver, you are a liar. But that's merely the obvious. Well, that's all for now, folks. What do you think about this story? Let me know down below in the comment section. As always, if you want to support the content that I produce, you can join me on Patreon or Subscribestar. Joining will gain you access to a private Discord server. If you want to donate, there's Donorbox and Crypto. And lastly, one of the best things you can do is simply to share the video. And hey, why not visit my merch store? Anyhow, thanks for watching. This has been Mr. Obvious, and I'll see you all next time.